I have a question that is the mother of all our questions as a fandom. When will you release the Snyder Cut?
Zack Snyder's Justice League, also known as the Snyder Cut, is a director's cut of the 2017 Justice League movie. However, many argue that this wasn't just a director's cut, this was an entirely different film. 4 years ago today, on March 18th, 2021, HBO Max premiered the legendary and elusive Zack Snyder's Justice League. But how did this movie come to be? Well, that is a journey we are going to go on in today's DC documentary. So, let's talk about the Snyder Cut, a battle for justice. This all began in 2012 when director Zack Snyder was hired by Warner Brothers on the recommendation of Christopher Nolan to direct the Superman reboot titled Man of Steel. A year later, in 2013, the movie starring Henry Cavill, Amy Adams, and Russell Crowe would go on to raise $670 million worldwide on an estimated $225 million budget. Whilst the majority of the audience enjoyed the film, critics were more split. But the studio were happy enough for Snyder to begin working on a sequel. Originally, the director planned on creating a more traditional solo Superman sequel that would have focused on the aftermath of the events from the first film and Superman's relationship with humanity. However, he also revealed to storyboard artist Jay Oliva in 2013, just before Man of Steel released, some storyboards of a sequel that included a Dark Knight Returns inspired Batman, implying Snyder had ideas of the sequel being a Batman vs Superman movie. Other reports, however, suggest it was Warner Brothers who pushed the idea for Batman to be introduced in the sequel, as they wanted to catch up to Marvel. In 2013, at San Diego Comic-Con, Harry Lennix took to the stage to make a very important announcement.
I want you to remember, look, in all the years to come, in all your most private moments, I want you to remember my hand at your throat. I want you to remember the one man, me.
Whoa! What? What? What?
And so began the expansion of the DC universe. Now making a Batman v Superman movie, the studio were keen on making further strides in reaching their rivals, and in April of 2014, Warner Brothers announced that Snyder would be directing the Justice League movie, and not soon after, production began on Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And whilst this movie was in production, Snyder and his team began planning out the extra 2 films continuing and expanding his story so far, those being Justice League 1 and 2. However, things wouldn't go as smoothly as originally planned. Ben Affleck brought in Oscar-winning writer Chris Terrio to step in and help rewrite the script, and in post-production, the studio cut out 30 minutes of the runtime. The motive behind this was to have more screenings available. So, the studio's focus was money and not story. The issue was that, as Chris Terrio says himself, the last things to get cut out always are the stunt scenes and the special effects scenes because they cost so much. The things that get cut first are the scenes that actually give meaning to those bigger action sequences. When the film released in March of 2016, it earned $872 million from a $263 million budget, with even more mixed reviews than Man of Steel. The film's opening weekend earned a massive $422.5 million worldwide. However, the drop-off was even larger, with a 68% decline in its second weekend, meaning almost half of the entire box office was only made in the opening weekend. This was not what Warner Brothers had hoped for, as with Batman and Superman starring in a movie together, they believed it had to make at least $1 billion, just like the Marvel movies were. And after the opening weekend, it looked like it was easily going to reach that, but poor reviews and bad word of mouth caused the movie to have a very poor drop-off in its second weekend, and the studio began doubting Snyder a lot. Instead of of thinking that maybe cutting 30 minutes from the runtime might have hurt the film's story, which Chris Terrio described as sabotaging the narrative, Warner Brothers instead put all the blame at Snyder's door. But with Snyder already hired and announced to direct Justice League, they persisted with him anyway, but told him and his team to rewrite the planned story as it was too dark. And these changes added another Justice League film to the mix, now creating a Justice League trilogy. And with those films planned out with the help of Jim Lee and Jeff Johns, Snyder began production on Justice League in April of 2016, a month after the release of Batman v Superman, with the mindset of completing his story. With Justice League now in production, Snyder's overarching story was beginning to unravel. The plan was a 5-movie story arc where Warner Brothers wanted other directors to expand and spin off from. Each of Snyder's movies were a chapter in his book, Man of Steel being the beginning, Justice League being the middle, and Justice League 3 being the end. Snyder saw this story as the rise and fall of our heroes. Man of Steel is about the rise of a hero, Batman v Superman is about the fall of our heroes, and so Justice League was to be the rise of the heroes again, and Justice League 2 and 3 was supposed to continue that trend. And that story had been teased in Batman v Superman, with Bruce Wayne's nightmare scene showing an Earth ruled by Darkseid and a mind-controlled Superman. But without further context, this scene to many was confusing and out of place. But on July 19th, 2016, during production of Justice League, the director's cut of Batman v Superman, also known as the Ultimate Edition, was released on Blu-ray and included the 30 minutes of footage cut from the theatrical release. One scene in particular massively set up Justice League, with Lex Luthor speaking to a hologram of an alien, who we would find out to be Steppenwolf and the main villain of the Justice League movie. However, this design was something the Warner Brothers executives did not like, claiming they wanted a more child-friendly design. Pre-visualization and concept art shows that Justice League at one point in time did include the original design, and while Snyder tried to push back against Warner Brothers' appeals, he eventually gave in and they changed the Steppenwolf design, while Snyder was still working on the film. But these weren't the only changes to come, not only on Snyder's Justice League movie, but also on another DC film. Whilst we are telling the story of the Snyder Cut, another movie was also drastically changed by the studio, and you cannot tell the story of Release the Snyder Cut without mentioning the Ayer Cut. After the negative reception to Batman v Superman and the positive reception to Marvel's Deadpool, the studio told director David Ayer to change his dark and soulful Suicide Squad movie into a comedy. And to this day, fans are still asking for the studio to release Ayer's original version of the film. And so as production went on Justice League, the studio became more and more doubtful with Snyder's ability to improve upon his previous films. But it was too late for them to remove him from the project. So instead, they became more and more controlling as time went on, and made it increasingly difficult for Snyder to make the movie the way he had planned. And unfortunately, during post-production, Zack Snyder and his family suffered a tragic loss. Zack's daughter Autumn Snyder unfortunately passed away, and while Snyder tried to continue working, it just became too much for him and he had to take a break. Snyder told Vanity Fair that Avengers director Joss Whedon was brought in by the studio before his departure for rewrites and was then given more and more creative power on the film. Still, Snyder has reiterated that the decision to leave Justice League was 100% his own, and that he left because at the time he had zero energy to fight the studio. So Warner Brothers made Justice League increasingly difficult for Snyder by bringing in Whedon for rewrites, and continued to make it difficult even after Snyder's family tragedy, and Snyder had no energy to fight the studio with the decisions they were making. So when he left the project, Warner Brothers decided to let Joss Whedon finish the movie. The studio claimed he was handpicked by Snyder to finish the film, and the cast and crew were told this as well, which explains why Ray Fisher said this at Comic-Con just before Justice League released.
Yeah, I mean, Joss is a great guy, and Zack picked a good person to come in and clean up and finish up for him.
In post-production, Warner Brothers began major rewrites and reshoots to the Justice League movie, costing around $70 million, wanting it to be brighter and funnier, but also now under 2 hours long. They also even changed the composer from Junkie XL, who worked on Man of Steel and Batman v Superman with Hans Zimmer to create brand new themes for these characters, and instead they hired Danny Elfman to reuse the John Williams Superman theme for Superman and the Michael Keaton Batman theme for Batman, doing everything they possibly could to disconnect Justice League from the previous 2 Snyder films. But they didn't even give Joss Whedon any extra time to complete these reshoots. A merger with AT&T meant high-level Warner Brothers employees such as Kevin Tsujihara and Toby Emmerich were concerned about their futures at the company, and if they released Justice League by its set release date, they would guarantee their bonuses this year instead of them being pushed back to the following year, where they might not be at the studio anymore. So they were desperate for the movie to not be delayed, which means once again, the priority was money rather than story. And when Justice League released on November 17th, 2017, still being credited as directed by Zack Snyder, it was even more disappointing than Man of Steel or Batman v Superman. From a massive $300 million budget caused by the reshoots, the movie only earned $657 million worldwide, but still had slightly higher scores from critics and audiences on Rotten Tomatoes than Batman v Superman. However, there were consistent criticisms of the movie, mixed tones, bad CGI, and feeling completely different to the previous 2 Zack Snyder films. And the most obvious issue with the film was Henry Cavill's upper lip. He was filming for Mission Impossible Fallout at the time when the reshoots happened, where his character had a mustache, which Paramount didn't allow him to shave for the Justice League reshoots. So when reshooting, Henry Cavill still had his mustache, leading to post-production needing to digitally remove it. But because they were rushing the film to meet the November 17th deadline, the CGI was poor and the reshot scenes stuck out like a sore thumb. And with the major disappointments of Justice League and how it felt nothing like the previous 2 movies, fans began questioning, is this really what Snyder made? And on November 21st, 2017, the very first Release the Snyder Cut hashtag was tweeted out, a hashtag that would be used millions of times over the next few years. On March 13th, 2018, the Justice League Blu-ray released, and 2 deleted scenes were revealed of Superman. The first being Superman walking through the Kryptonian ship, and is a scene that directly connects us back to Man of Steel. We hear Hans Zimmer's Superman theme rather than John Williams' Superman theme that was used throughout the rest of Justice League 2017. And this deleted scene also implies that some form of flight scene was going to take place that would be a callback to the Man of Steel movie. And the second deleted scene was of Superman arriving at Bruce Wayne's lakeside home talking to Alfred. Another scene that would connect us to the events of Batman v Superman and explains how Superman would know where the Justice League are. These 2 scenes on their own showed fans that there was more footage from Justice League that should have been in the movie, and this was the Kickstarter of wanting to know more. Fans began creating comparison shots from the initial trailers to the Blu-ray release, clearly presenting the significant changes that had gone on since Snyder's departure on the project. And in the behind-the-scenes section of the Justice League Blu-ray, a shot of the League looking up at something or someone was also revealed, but never appeared in the film, and Snyder later confirmed that this was the League looking through a boom tube, which caused fans to theorize what they were looking at. And Kevin Smith talked to a person who saw both versions of Justice League, and what she revealed was shocking.
However, at one point, Steppenwolf tries to tempt Superman into joining his army. This made me so angry. And we see Darkseid. Was that in the version you saw? You saw Darkseid?
Yes, there was a Darkseid in there.
Darkseid was going to be in Justice League. These details were vital pieces of information to help the fandom build true momentum behind their movement. And in 2018, a group of fans campaigned outside of Warner Brothers Burbank offices, pushing for the studio to release the Snyder Cut. But the studio pushed back, claiming there is no Snyder Cut, it just doesn't exist. And whilst most fans were respectful, a vocal minority began being toxic towards the studio and spamming the hashtag on any Warner Brothers post they could find, creating a perfect excuse for the studio not wanting to interact with the fandom. But the majority of fans stayed strong with the messaging and were united in their cause of wanting the Snyder Cut released, and in August of 2019, things really started to ramp up. Whilst Warner Brothers had released Aquaman and Shazam, trying to create a new path forward for the DCEU, fans were not moving on from what was set up a few years prior. DC fans began raising money for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and crowdfunding for billboards and sky banners that were to be shown at San Diego Comic-Con, doing as much as they possibly could to show their support for Snyder and his version of Justice League. And Snyder could see that and decided to help stoke the fire himself, releasing exclusive black and white images from his cut of Justice League on his Vero profile. This gave fans all the ammunition they needed to continue pursuing the Snyder Cut, but Jason Momoa helped fans out even more by confirming that he has seen the movie. But something else was happening too. Fans began looking beyond just the Snyder Cut when Snyder discussed at a Vero Q&A the planned story for Justice League 2 and 3, mentioning things such as time travel that explained why Barry Allen appeared in the Batcave in Batman v Superman, but also revealed one major plot point that made the fans go wild.
Because he had to jump right before Darkseid boom tubes into the Batcave to murder Lois, so you have to Anyway.
This was ultimately the spark that ignited the Restore the Snyderverse movement that we know today. Hearing how everything was already planned out since Batman v Superman and how everything tied in together was what fans wanted. Raising money for AFSP and getting the Snyder Cut released wasn't the only thing on fans' minds anymore. For many, it was also about what the Snyder Cut was setting up. 2 more Justice League films that would have explained everything. The Snyder fandom has always been driven by a strong sense of justice, which is why the circumstances surrounding Zack Snyder's DC films felt particularly unjust to them. With Batman v Superman and the theatrical cut of Justice League both being altered by studio interference, many fans believed Snyder's vision had been unfairly misrepresented. And this frustration deepened when teased storylines from those films intended to be fully explored in Justice League 2 and 3 were left unresolved. For the fandom, these sequels wouldn't have just expanded the story, they would have provided vital context, making the existing films feel more complete. The belief that Snyder's true vision had been cut short and wrongly blamed for DC's struggles fueled a powerful sense of injustice, which is the ultimate drive for the Release the Snyder Cut campaign. The next Release the Snyder Cut trending event was set to happen on November 17th, 2019. Being the 2-year anniversary since Justice League released, and the goal was 214,000 tweets. An ambitious task, but why 214 specifically? Well, because it was revealed by Snyder that the cut of Justice League that he currently had was 214 minutes long. So the movement used that number as motivation for trending days and goals, and is still to this day a special number for the fandom. So on November 17th, fans started tweeting, and that day did not disappoint. Zack Snyder, Ray Fisher, Gal Gadot, Jason Momoa, and Ben Affleck all joined in with the event and tweeted out "Release the Snyder Cut." This was the first true backing from the actors, and this helped the movement massively, almost reaching 1 million tweets for Release the Snyder Cut in one day. A huge statement from the fandom. Threatened by this, Warner Brothers made a statement through Variety stating the Snyder Cut is a pipe dream and there is no way it's ever happening. But this only motivated fans more. They had seen the images Snyder shared on Vero. They had seen Jason Momoa confirming the Snyder Cut exists. And they had seen the actors backing the Release the Snyder Cut movement. A desperate article from Warner Brothers wasn't going to kill the movement now. And Snyder continued to stoke the fire in December of 2019, sharing even more images. The first being an image of his cut of Justice League in film canisters with the words, "Is it real? Does it exist? Of course it does." And then on December 12th, a brand new image of Henry Cavill's Superman in a black Superman suit, something that had only been a rumor but never been confirmed until now. Throughout production of Justice League, Henry Cavill only wore a blue and red suit because while Snyder wanted the black suit, Warner Brothers pushed for the blue and red to make Superman feel more hopeful. So Snyder compromised and filmed in the red and blue suit, but he planned on changing it to black in post-production. This became another strong difference between the 2017 version of Justice League and Zack Snyder's director's cut. Snyder really knew how to get the fandom talking, and this kept the conversation flowing into the new year. He also regularly answered fans' questions on his posts, and some were trying to find out which scenes were reshoots and which were Snyder's original scenes. Now, Snyder to this day has never watched the 2017 version of the movie. He revealed that Christopher Nolan and Deborah Snyder both told him he can never watch that movie because it would break his heart. So when fans have asked him about reshot scenes, he has always been confused by them. But those comments really helped the fandom decipher which scenes were his and which scenes were reshoots. However, throughout the Snyder Cut movement, fans were able to easily tell the difference between Snyder's and Whedon's shots, and fans would incorporate these differences into their posts when advocating for the Snyder Cut's release. And this really helped others understand how different Zack Snyder's version was. Concept art also revealed an idea of Batman discovering a nest of humans turning into parademons, but Snyder confirmed he wasn't allowed to film it due to the studio thinking it was too dark. And many of Snyder's original darker ideas suffered the same fate, and only made it as far as the concept art stage. Meanwhile, over at Warner Brothers, they were hard at work crafting their new streaming platform, releasing in May 2020 called HBO Max. And in early 2020, there were rumors about AT&T executives and reluctant Warner Brothers executives meeting up with Zack Snyder to discuss a potential release of the Snyder Cut. Clearly, the recent trending event and the backing of the actors was large enough to get the attention of AT&T, and with their new streaming platform releasing soon in a very competitive market, they needed something massive and unique to bring in subscribers. Whilst parts of the DC fandom claimed the film didn't exist or it was a pipe dream, the Release the Snyder Cut fandom didn't ever give up, and their patience and persistence was rewarded. On May 20th, 2020, Zack Snyder hosted a Man of Steel watch party, and everything was normal until one special guest arrived.
Hey guys, thought I might crash your little watch party.
Henry Cavill made a special cameo at the end of the movie to say hi to Zack and his wife Deborah. But this felt special, and as multiple fans joined the call as well, the watch party turned into a Q&A. But there was only one question fans were waiting for, and then it happened.
I have a question.
Yeah.
That is the mother of all our questions as the fandom. When will you release the Snyder Cut?
I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Henry?
I would love to see a version of Justice League without the moustache.
Like I told you, I have it. So it's just a question of like, we got to find a way to show it.
I reckon you should show it.
I reckon
Well,
you
Yeah,
too.
I mean,
No disagreement here.
I mean, there is this. We're doing it. So get ready.
Oh my God.
And so, after 2.5 years of determined campaigning, Zack Snyder's Justice League was being released on Warner Brothers' new streaming platform HBO Max on March 18th, 2021. Finally, after all those trending events, all those articles saying it didn't exist or it was a pipe dream, the Snyder Cut was being released. But there was work to be done. The film had incomplete CGI, and things like Superman's costume and Steppenwolf's design had to be changed to their original plans, which Warner Max allowed Snyder to do. Along with this, Zack was allowed to film a few extra scenes, one being another Nightmare Future scene to set up Justice League 2 and 3, where for the first and final time we had Ben Affleck's Batman and Jared Leto's Joker interacting with one another, and the other being Martian Manhunter meeting Bruce Wayne and talking about Darkseid's invasion. Snyder also filmed another version of that scene on his driveway with Wayne T. Carr, who was going to be John Stewart, aka Green Lantern. But Warner Brothers did not allow Snyder to put him in the movie, as they claimed they had their own plans for Green Lantern. For reference, that was 5 years ago, and it took a whole new regime to come in 2023 before we got anything new regarding Green Lantern. And when the Snyder Cut was announced, official Zack Snyder's Justice League merchandise released, focusing on raising more money for AFSP. And on the back of the t-shirts and hoodies, it said Associate Producer. The reason for that is because Zack saw the fandom as producers of the movie, as without them, it would have never been released. Which is another way Snyder showed his appreciation and recognition to the fandom who never gave up. Post-production for the Snyder Cut cost around $70 million to complete, and in July 2020, we got our first glimpse at some of those changes. A fan-made online event called JusticeCon arrived, where Zack Snyder and many other special guests made an appearance, all while raising more money for AFSP. This was a true fan event that the makers of the Snyder Cut supported and were a part of, and Zack Snyder was kind enough to reveal the new version of Superman visiting Alfred. Now in the black suit and the 4:3 aspect ratio, this was our first look at how they would change the blue and red suit to the black suit in post-production. And 1 month later at DC Fandom, the very first full teaser trailer for Zack Snyder's Justice League was going to be released. However, just hours before the event, the trailer mysteriously leaked online, but fortunately did not damage the official trailer's release. Blowing up the internet, the first teaser trailer practically revealed all new, never-before-seen footage, and this was vital in displaying why this film was so vastly different to the Justice League film released in 2017. But Warner Brothers executives apparently didn't like this. In an interview in 2021, Snyder said, "It was cool to do the Snyder Cut of Justice League, and that was fun and everything, but Warner Brothers still tortured me the whole time for whatever reason. They can't help it. I don't know why I'm such a pain in their ass, because I'm not trying to be, honestly." And Zack wasn't the only one who had issues with the studio. In July of 2020, Ray Fisher spoke out stating, "Joss Whedon's on-set treatment of the cast and crew of Justice League was gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable. He was enabled in many ways by Jeff Johns and John Berg. Accountability over entertainment." This created a large investigation by Warner Media into these accusations, but they did not make their results public. Whilst Warner Media was satisfied with their investigation, Ray Fisher wasn't, stating that DC President Walter Hamada enabled the actions of those accused and refuses to work on any future DC project made by him. Since then, nothing has been resolved, and both Hamada and Fisher no longer work at the company. And Walter Hamada had stated in December of 2020 that the Snyder Cut was a storytelling cul-de-sac, meaning a street that leads nowhere, as there were questions rising whether or not this cut would lead to more movies being made. So Hamada made a strong effort to shut down those conversations. Ironically, Hamada's final 4 DC movies that he produced in 2023 ended up being a cul-de-sac themselves, as the new heads of DC decided to reboot the universe, making those 4 movies utterly pointless to the future of DC. Now, a week before Zack Snyder's Justice League was set to release on HBO Max, which still wasn't available in many countries, somehow the 4-hour-long cut of Justice League leaked on the streaming service when customers went to watch the new Tom and Jerry movie. No one factually knows how that happened, but based on the actions of the Warner Brothers executives in the past, many believe this was their final attempt at trying to make the film fail. But they did not succeed. On March 18th, 2021, exactly 1,217 days after Justice League released in the cinema and 973 days after they claimed it never existed, the Snyder Cut released on HBO Max, and it instantly crashed the streaming service. The amount of demand for the film as soon as it released was something HBO Max struggled to handle, but the Snyder Cut was finally released worldwide. The film that didn't exist was now available to the world. Labeled as a global phenomenon by the new Warner Media president Priya Dogra, and it became the 4th most streamed movie of 2021 according to Variety. We don't know the precise streaming numbers as Warner Brothers doesn't share that information, and HBO Max wasn't available worldwide at the time, but third-party sources have given us a rough idea of its performance in the US. According to Samba TV, Zack Snyder's Justice League earned 3.2 million views in its first 17 days. In comparison to the Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman 1984, it didn't do as well. However, there are various explanations to this. The first is the 4-hour runtime. As this was a director's cut and only released on streaming, the runtime was able to be as long as Snyder wanted, but 4 hours isn't appealing to everyone. Not only that, but with this technically being a director's cut of a movie that released 4 years prior, the demand to watch the movie right away will be naturally less than a brand new movie's release. But like I mentioned, that's only in the US. Like the CEO of Warner Media said, the movie was a global phenomenon, and Variety states that it was the 4th most streamed movie of 2021, clearly displaying the worldwide popularity and the success the movie had. Not only that, but on Rotten Tomatoes, the film excelled with audiences and critics alike, which shows not only that this film was enjoyed by the vast majority, but a film that showed that Snyder did improve upon his previous work, and that the executives who changed Justice League were completely wrong. In July of 2022, the Rolling Stone put out an article stating fake accounts fueled the Snyder Cut online army. A Warner Media report reveals that bots and other inauthentic users bolstered the fan-led campaign for director Zack Snyder's Justice League do-over. And in an interview, Zack Snyder responded to this report saying, "The truth is, it doesn't matter. The movie got made. If they were smart enough to employ bots in this thing, then they won. That movie has no business existing, and it does." And it is fair to say, bots or not, the success and popularity of the movie proves even if there were bots involved in getting the movie released, there was a clear, genuine, and large demand for that film, and its viewership and critical success since its release only proves that. To this day, some fans continue to push for the continuation of Snyder's vision, their best efforts being a record-breaking 1.5 million tweets for Restore the Snyderverse in 2021. A movement that Zack Snyder has publicly acknowledged, and he has gone on record multiple times stating that he would love to complete the story that his previous 3 DC films set up, which is one of the main motivating factors as to why fans still keep on pushing for the Snyderverse to return. The passionate love these fans have for this movie and this universe is something truly special, and without that, they wouldn't have got the movie that doesn't exist. So who knows what's possible? And so that is the story of the Snyder Cut, a battle for justice that took over 2.5 years of campaigning and raising money for charity, waiting for the stars to align and the Snyder Cut to be released. Zack Snyder dedicated the movie to his daughter Autumn Snyder, and 4 years on, the movement managed to raise a massive total of $1.1 million for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention in her name. And that is truly remarkable. It shows exactly how a fan base can unite together for a cause and do some good in the world and achieve the impossible. The Snyder Cut was a myth, brought to life by fans' love of storytelling, heroism, and justice.
Hey guys, just a quick word of thanks. You know as well as I do that none of this would be at all possible without your incredible dedication
and incredible perseverance. This whole thing started, and I thought, it's amazing that these guys want to see what I made, but I was sure it would go away, and it didn't. Not only did it not go away, but it started to become a real movement. And I saw it raise awareness for ASFP. I saw it bring a giant group of people together. And I saw one voice that changed the world and made anything possible. So for that, I just want to say thank you. You guys are amazing.